Phil Harris and Josh Phegan come together in an incredible fortnightly podcast, Dream Big, Move Fast.
A progressive, contemporary conversation on what it takes to be a dynamic thinker, leader, and role model.
Backed with over 2 decades of friendship, trials and tribulations that teach from real-world experience and what it takes to dream big, move fast. Business is the greatest platform for change. Mark Benioff. Phil, this is probably one of my favourite quotes, and I got to see Mark Benioff speak at the Salesforce conference, Dreamforce, a few years back. And it kind of just gets me to think that everything that you want to see in life, everything you want to see in the world, everything you want to see change in the community and in a society, it really comes back down to, making sure that business is doing the right thing and that it is one of the greatest platforms for change. And, I was recently in Dubai, and, one of the quotes over there is to ultimately say, if it's good for business, it's good for Dubai. Phil, let's talk a little bit about it. Why is business one of the greatest platforms for change?
I'm with you, Josh. I think it's a great quote. And if I relate it directly straight back into the real estate industry, when you think of the brands or the organisations and the individuals that are doing very well, it seems that there is a deep and great passion for change, but not just change, but continual innovation and improvement. So, yeah, great quote. And I think it's something that we can all work towards.
Yeah, I just remember when we first started out, I think auctioneering, and that was a really important conversation. How much did that drive our confidence? Going to the Australasian Auctioneering Championships and learning what that was like. And I remember those moments and how energizing it was to kind of get into that environment and ultimately the type of person that you would become. And at the time, you never really realized it, but you were kind of pushing the edges around what was going to happen on the inside of your business. Now, Phil, it's an important conversation because today we're going to talk about, really getting into that flywheel and that level of momentum. And, we've seen that with Harris Real Estate in Adelaide. Hopefully you've seen that in our training business here too. And the interesting conversation is about really learning what a flywheel actually is. So in your words, how would you typify what actually is a flywheel and why is that important to kind of get momentum inside of any business and life?
Yeah, flywheel, it's a great concept. And actually, Josh, you were down with us in Adelaide going back only a couple of weeks ago and you shared the concept of the flywheel to our sales team specifically. But if you haven't read the all-time bestseller, Good to Great by Jim Collins, it's one of the feature chapters in there, which is understanding the flywheel, which is basically about, as an organisation, building enduring success by some repeatable activities. So if you're wondering what the flywheel is, grab a copy of that book. In fact, there's actually a separate book that's actually come out just specifically on the flywheel, so great to get a hold of that one. But ultimately, if I relate it back to real estate sales specifically, to make it easy for people, it's about what are those core things that need to be done that actually become repeatable. And so many agents, I think, they go through their careers not being able to duplicate and replicate success, whereas the flywheel, when you zero in on the core things that need to be undertaken each and every single day, you start to realise that success as an individual or inside an organisation is basically about repeating, 4, 5 or 6 key things daily, and the results start to stack upon each other.
In that book, Flywheel Momentum, they talk a lot about Amazon. I think that's kind of a nice one to start with, outside of industry, and then we'll go into industry. But in Amazon, they kind of started with this whole idea. They were selling books, right? So it was lower prices on more offerings. And what actually happened is that then you'd increase customer visits. So more people would go to the website. That then attracted third-party sellers because they actually had a lot of people, coming to have a look at the books. So what else could we sell them? Maybe we could sell them book lights or something, right? Then expanded the store and they extended the distribution. So originally it was just America, and then it was UK, and then it was Europe, and then now it's Australasia. Then they grew revenues per fixed cost. So they worked out what their fixed costs were to actually open a plant, to actually be able to do all of the distribution center, to be able to make that actually happen. And what actually happens is that then it goes through that flywheel again, because now they've got a distribution center, they can have lower prices on more offerings, and then they get more increased customer visits, and then you attract more third-party sellers, and they expanded the store, and that extended the distribution. Then they grew revenues again by fixed costs, and they've become, one of the biggest companies in the world. And Jeff Bezos, the owner, I think even post-divorce is still one of the richest men in the world, and it's kind of crazy when you see those things happening. Now, I read that and I went into the residential real estate sector and I thought, okay, well, how does this actually happen in all of the different people that I've worked with? And I thought, about our own journey in what we've both gone through. And I thought, well, first of all, was this absolute unbelievable passion and energy and drive towards acquisition of knowledge. What was it like to learn how to do a listing presentation, how to actually prospect, how to go and sell, then learning about areas and prices and building codes and what you could do in all of that, and then learning how to run a team. And as you start to acquire knowledge, you get exposed to clients. And, Phil, we all had our day one. Do you remember your first ever open house?
I'm not sure if I remember it specifically, but I know it wouldn't have been great.
And then you look at that, but like, you got exposure to customers, right? And if you're doing it well, you're meeting neighbours, and you're also bringing buyers, and you're bringing sellers, and you're bringing buyers, sellers, and you're meeting landlords or investors in that environment. And what actually happens is you get that client exposure, but how do you actually move that to deal exposure? So it's like, we put Phil Harris on a door and open for inspection, and he can meet 10 people, and he knows that 5 of them live locally and 3 of them are market appraisals and one's a listing appointment opportunity. But we put Junior Josh on that same door, and he claims that everyone's a first home buyer. And so that whole conversation around learning, like, what are the questions that really gain you significant traction? Have you bought locally, and what are your plans with the existing, as an example, to then move those customers that we've been exposed to into real deals, that we're signing agency agreements, signing deals as a part of offer and acceptance. And then what was all about for us was about mastery of routine, right? So, what you're talking about, repeatable actions, do this, we get that, we do this, we get that. And that was a really important part, because as we mastered that routine, we got social proof. So if you're looking to buy a house in that particular area, it was almost impossible not to meet a Phil Harris or not to meet a Josh Phegan. And what that did is that social proof then allowed us to go and scale our service. And we go through that revolution. We learned how to do a deal a month. And then one day we started to think about it. We had to acquire some more knowledge. We got exposed to a few more clients. We got a few more deals that we're exposed to. We mastered routines. We got more social proof. All of a sudden, we went to 2 deals a month, 5 deals a month, 10 deals a month, up to Alexander Phillips type stuff, where you can see up to 28 transactions per month, in a team. And it's a really important conversation to think about how that flywheel works and operates. Phil, I often think I wish I had me in training day one when I first started now, and not saying that at an arrogant level, but just the amount that I've learned over those years. And it's a really important conversation. Why does an agent need to be aware of a flywheel, and what can they do to really master it so that they can actually get themselves up to a completely different level of momentum?
And this was when we spoke, I said a couple of weeks ago with our team, we had this conversation, Josh, about how I think in the real estate space, you get trainers come in, you go to conferences, and you become so scattered with so many different things that you can be doing. Whereas the reality is, if you actually go deep into fewer things, the opportunity to leverage and grow your business is just so significant if you can actually master those things. I think where agents go wrong is by having too many things that they're scattered and focused on versus going, what are the actual core things that enable me to win as a real estate agent? So we know if you start going around that flywheel, number one, if you haven't got a solid prospecting plan in place that you actually stick to, not 10 different strategies. And I think the conversation we had with our team was around actually running open homes at an incredibly high level, not just taking a name and number and trying to get a hold of people on a Monday when we know 50% of people won't even pick up the phone when you ring, but how do you actually go deep into that particular strategy, then actually being great at the listing process, then the facilitation of making a sale, repeat customers. So I think they're the sorts of things that guys need to go deep into with creating their flywheel. But throwing a question back to you, because you've got the privilege of working alongside maybe the best agent in the world now, Alexander Phillips. Like if you went from 12 o'clock and worked your way around, what do you see as like the top 4 or 5 items that Alex has done really well in his business?
I think the first key part is, without a doubt, that high level of consistency. So what's been listed, what's been sold in the last 24 hours, and who does that impact? Secondary part is tremendously loyal. So once you work with Alex, you work with Alex for the rest of your life. I think the third thing, without a doubt, is that literally ruthless routine. So, you're not going to get a guy like that who's going to take a call even from me between 7:30 and 3, because that's prime client time. So if I'm bringing him during the day, he's expecting that that's because I'm helping him to put a transaction together or I'm giving him a referral. But anything that's coaching is outside of those hours, or podcast stuff is outside of those hours, right? And then I think like the fourth thing, without a doubt, is about the usage and building of great relationships, so that you've got to have phenomenal people around you. There's not a person that he's not connected to inside of those local communities. And I think probably the fifth thing is about like really learning the power of planning. Like there's a guy that will go on holidays at Christmas with a high level of momentum already ready for when he gets back. Same at Easter period, same at any time in the year, where he's actually really clear to go and get those plans together. And I look at the kind of like these flywheels. I just think that the big opportunity for any real estate agent is to understand, hey, how do I need to go to get into a high level of momentum? Now, we've got the same thing inside of a training company, a daily email, a weekly coaching tip, speak really well on stage and ring 20 people a day and feel that sells your business out 18 months in advance. And, you know that you can do it. But I just wish that in the very early days, I had have understood that, particularly in the residential real estate sector.
So when you say those 4 or 5 things that enables Alex to do what he does, right? And all the coaching that we get, we go to conferences and seminars, it's not like we don't hear too many new ideas coming out about who you should be calling and what you should be saying and those sorts of things. To help the guys listening to really unlock around this flywheel concept, what gets in the way of actually agreeing first and foremost what your flywheel is going to be, and then what actually limits you to actually executing that on a daily basis versus being distracted and being inconsistent day by day.
I think jealousy gets in the way for a lot of people, and ego gets in the way, and also to a lot of limiting beliefs. So, out the front of here of the office, I've actually got 2 cars parked. I'm not sure if you noticed when you came in, but I've actually got a Toyota Corolla and I've got a Toyota Land Cruiser. And so my question for you is, Phil, which car should we take?
I take the Land Cruiser.
Right, but here's the key thing. You don't know where we're going.
Yeah, sure.
But you've already tried to choose a business model.
Yeah, sure.
So if we're just whipping into town to go and quickly get some tickets for a Dave Chappelle show tonight, fine, we might just take the Corolla because it's quick. But if we're going out to the desert and we're towing a caravan, we're definitely taking the Land Cruiser. So it's, when you kind of see people go, oh, I couldn't be like that person because they've got a high average sale price, or their area is different to me, or they're younger, they're older, they're male, they're female, they've got hair, they don't have hair, whatever your series of inhibitions are. The reality of it is it's just a model. So what I know straight away is that if I was out of doing residential training as a real estate coach and I said, okay, great, I'm going to go and be a real estate agent, mate, the number one place I would start if I was going to do Eastern Suburbs Sydney, I would work inside of Alex's team, even day one, regardless of my knowledge, skill, capability. Why? Because I know there is a ton of lead opportunity that comes from the amount of customer exposure from 28 open for inspections on a Saturday inside of that business. And so literally, if you just sit there enough, respectfully to Alex, I'm just going to catch $1 million worth of leads that are just going to slip through the fingers because there's so much opportunity that sits in that. That's a very different business model to trying to, cold call and door knock your way to greatness.
So you think number one blockage is lack of identification of the actual marketplace or the agent that you actually need to be to win in your market.
Yeah.
So rather than external focus on what Alex is doing or what this person's doing, and so, well, hang on, what is the agent who wins in my marketplace? What do they need to do rather than worrying about what other people are doing?
And I kind of love this whole idea. There was this once a client came to me and he said, oh, look, I'm really worried because one of my competitors is doing video. So they're doing video. I'm going to stop doing video because I don't want to be the same as them. And I said to him, hey, man, just so you know, he goes, yeah. I said, I also heard they're using the phone as well. And he's like, oh, yeah. And I said, mate, it's not about whether or not someone else does it. It's about how well you actually do it. And I think that this is probably one of the greatest opportunities for any real estate agent is to actually understand, hey, what's my business model? Now, and don't be envious about someone else who's got a different business model than the one that you've got now. We've got some people
play the market, and if you don't like it, move.
Yeah,
right?
and you're not a tree. And that's that whole conversation about actually understanding what is actually the total size of the marketplace. I'm amazed at how many people don't know that. They'll tell me 5,000 homes, but they don't know how many sell every year. So like literally, oh, Josh, I want to do 50 transactions. Okay, great. We have a look and there's only 25 sales a year, so they need 200% market share. So that's crazy. So you need to know that in the 10-year trend line, so understand where the peaks and troughs are. So you've actually got a good-sized business. I realised I'm originally from the country, as you know. There's no way I could be a real estate trainer just in Albury. There's not enough uncles.
It's not there. Yeah.
And so from that point of view, I actually had to go Australia and I had to go with New Zealand, and then we had to go to the UK and the UAE to actually try to chase off the ambitions and the dreams. And I think that this is a really important part. And Alex actually said this very early on, make sure that your marketplace is big enough for your aspirations. So, Phil, knowing what you know about getting a business up and getting momentum and watching, you guys are north of 2,000 plus transactions. I remember too when you were, kind of hitting 40 and 50 transactions a year.
Yeah.
So what's the difference that you saw in that flywheel in getting the business beyond just Phil Harris himself as an individual to that level of momentum inside of a marketplace?
I think the biggest observation I see, going from 50 to 100 sales a year to now, close to 2,500 sales is, I would say, the flywheel for us has been the empowerment of the sales individual, of making sure that there are scalable resources and tools in place for people to actually become the best version of themselves. Now, I'm not encouraging everybody to pack up and leave the office that they're in. That's definitely not the case. But if you think about what are the things that a salesperson needs to absolutely thrive, number one, before you start talking about infrastructure, they need environment, So is it actually an inspiring environment for people to be around? So that's something I take very seriously. Am I the type of person that people actually want to work around? Am I bringing energy and am I encouraging people? And so first and foremost, if it starts with environment, then you've got the basics in place, which is people need coaching and deal support. Like as human beings, we need to have that interaction of having somebody who actually congratulate you and tap you on the back and say, yeah, well done, you are actually going in the right direction. And so much of this business that we're in, particularly in the early days, Josh, I think for agents that are first starting, or even if you're not starting, you might be writing 800 grand a year and you want to double your business. A lot of this business is actually based on faith, meaning you've got to undertake a whole series of activities in your career and not get short-term payoff. So you actually need, as part of that environment, there's got to be a coach and a mentor there to say, yeah, keep doing what you're doing. I know the results aren't there today, right? But if you keep doing what you're doing, we are going to see results in 18 months' time, 24 months' time, or whatever it might be. So I think environment is critical. I think coaching, mentoring becomes absolutely imperative if you want to really grow a sustainable business. And then you can start having a conversation about infrastructure. Yes, they need CRM. Yes, they need marketing collateral. Yes, they need listing tools. Yes, they need, all of those sort of things. But they're kind of the big things that come to mind for me.
Do you think that's a different world now, like about like instant gratification, and the generation and the technologies that are coming through and what it's doing to the general population? Because I would remember if I had the chance to go to a training event, I would be there like bells on. That would be in the diary. That was absolute number one priority. If there was and I know this is weird, but my dad had like a cassette series. I'd go listen to that, Brian Tracy and Zig Ziglar and Jim Rohn and some of those greats back in the day. Like you would be all over that like there's no tomorrow. Whereas now it's kind of like, I don't know if I want to go. And it's like, are you kidding? Because, Sam Zell's got this great quote. You never know where you're going to learn. And to me, I just want to put myself in more of the environments where there's more opportunity to learn. So then I can pick up that particular piece of information which puts the jigsaw puzzle together. And when I learn that, then all of a sudden it changes. And I know that for you and I, like that, and anyone who knows our history, that the day that we would learn our listing presentations, that was like absolute game changing for what I was going to do as a real estate agent.
Well, that was back in the day, Josh. Well, we used to record our listing presentations and burn them onto CDs.
Yeah.
And we'd post them across border.
Yeah.
And we'd listen to each other's listing presentations and we'd make critiques and we'd send them back. And it used to depress me. I used to get, you'd send me 20 pages of notes. I'd give you only 5 bullet points, but you'd send me a breakdown of where I could improve. But I think you're tapping into something very important there. And I think a lot of the things we're talking about can be taught. You can be taught listing skills. You can be taught, buyer management skills, all of those sorts of things. But the missing ingredient is what you're speaking about there, which is, do you have an appetite or what I would say is a lust for learning? Mm-hmm. And that's the one part that you can't drag people kicking and screaming to growth. Mm. But then I think that becomes, a whole nother podcast episode, a deeper philosophy is that if you subscribe to a personal philosophy that life is about learning and continual growth and that you've got a responsibility, which, by the way, real estate is only one aspect of your life, right, and a very small aspect of your life, but do you have an appetite for growth in every area of your life and you feel as though you've got actual responsibility to keep improving and to become the best version of yourself? That's when we start seeing people get great results because most of the skills are very easy and learnable, but having the desire to continually improve, that's the secret sauce I haven't quite unbottled yet just to be able to pour upon people just yet.
Now, I think the big conversation there on the flywheel side of stuff is also understanding your value. And it's kind of an interesting part, in understanding a flywheel. I'm also of the belief that if you prospect a certain way, you get more opportunities that are uncontested. And if you get more opportunities that are uncontested, and you actually get better fees. And really the whole conversation here is that to get into a really good quality flywheel, what you've got to start thinking about is that, are you actually going to be one of those people that really understands the difference between being a value seller and a price seller? And I think that, there's a conversation where really there's a lot of people that want to feature match in our industry. Yeah, we do that, we do that, and we do that. But do we? Because like the difference is actually seen in the result. And one of the things that, we've been concentrating a lot in training is about saying, okay, great, well, when a market, changes, it's really important to actually understand your value, and you've got to think about what are the things that you actually do before, during, and post. And there was a great book called Jobs to Be Done, and that was all about actually understanding what actually are the things that you can do before, during, and post the transaction to become more valuable. So, I'm arguing no more bottles of champagne, and instead I'd rather send a cleaner through in the hour and a half before settlement, just to wipe down the windows and wash down the wet areas so that literally it's easier for the seller and it's a better experience for the buyer when they turn up to that property. I'm arguing for a handyman to go a month later after they've moved in to spend 1 hour just to fix any gates and move any doors around and do things that they might need to do just to assist that person. I think that's actually of more value. But it just doesn't seem as glossy or as Instagrammable to take the photo of the handyman, right, as opposed to the bottle of Moët and Chandon. And so what I'm saying to people is that, before the transaction, there's storage of stuff that they just don't need to have at the property whilst it's available on market, getting the property ready for market, painting, landscaping, mini renovations. We're now moving in, some styling stuff whilst it's actually on the market. Really simple things like open day preparation before an open house. If you've got a vendor who's coming from Tasmania and you're selling a house in Sydney, then, actually getting the leaves out of that front driveway is an awesome little thing, and sending them a little FaceTime video as you walk through the property, say, hey guys, we're gearing up for the open for inspection this morning and everything's ready and presentable, so they don't have to be there and travel from Tassie to do it, right?
When I think about these things, Josh, everything that you're talking about is almost counterintuitive to young agents or all agents kind of natural inclination now with what we're being directed through socials, and we all want this instant gratification, whereas all of these things that you're talking about, and I'm not sure kind of what comes first, chicken or the egg, but I see great agents like Alex and others. It seems as though because they are playing the long game and they're continually thinking about, okay, I've just sold this person a house, I'm actually now planning on selling this person's house in 10 years' time and 20 years' time. There's such a better focus on just, rather than short-term gains of what I've got to do just to get business now, what am I doing to put these things in place so I'm their age again in another decade's time. Just, I want to pin you down on so that the guys really understand this flywheel concept. So if I'm listening to this and I say, I want to really narrow down my flywheel concept, what do I got to do to move this forward? The first thing you said is understand and identify your marketplace of what you've got to play. Can I get your 4 or 5 tangible things guys want to take away to actually create their own flywheel? What would you be doing?
I think about on this value creation piece is that literally great service transcends all market conditions. So if you think about that as actually being the important
great service transcends all market conditions.
So you got to start thinking that if you're just phenomenal around the service delivery, people will always justify a way to come and use you and your product or your service. And you want to.
Can I add to that as well? And it needs to be unconditional and non-judgmental of any individual. So whether it's a buyer, whether it's a tenant, whether it's a seller, whether everybody's part of that. And
whether or not you're selling a studio apartment or a 5-bedroom, the best house in the area. I think that this whole conversation is that you've got to be able to help humans out. And my favorite quote on that is to think that, we all put our genes on one leg at a time. Some people do the 2-legged thing and fall back on the bed. But the basic idea is to really understand that we're all human and you've got to make that great existence. To get the flywheel right, how do you actually generate your leads? What do you actually do to make sure there's a system or a formula? So if someone's taught how to generate those leads, that they can actually follow that system or that formula. And then what do you do to make sure that you've got really clear measurement on it so that you can go and do it over and over and over again? And if you do that, then ultimately it changes everything that you do inside of your business.
Do you think people overcomplicate the lead source and they do too many?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think the biggest thing is that they spend a lot of money in areas that just don't get a result. So whenever a market tightens, the number one thing I see agents do is they stop marketing and they actually have to get back to relationships. And you know what? When a market's really great, they just spend all this cash on marketing that they don't need to because it's all ego fulfillment, as opposed to actually really understanding what works. Now, if you or I, Phil, had to open up a real estate agency, we happen to be recording in Double Bay today, and we had to go and open a real estate agency together. We've got none of the advantages that we've had in the past, just our knowledge, and that's it. What would we both do? We'd get our first open for inspection. We would work the 10, 10, 20, the 10 neighbours either side, the 20 across the street. We'd get every neighbour we could to that open for inspection. We'd get great photography, great videography. We'd work every relationship. We'd be there like bells on, polished shoes, great blue suits, white shirts, right? Ready to rock and roll on that Saturday with a name badge. And we'd be super friendly to everyone that we can. Man, if we did not generate 1, 2 or 3 listing opportunities off the back of that campaign by the time that property was sold, there would be something seriously wrong. But what I see is a lot of agents taking shortcuts, turning up to an open house, don't have any music playing, still trying to work out how to pair the Bluetooth speaker, not in a position they've even got the name badge, not taking names and numbers, all that stuff.
It all leads back to the original road of one telephone call, one conversation, one person, one relationship at a time. And if you keep stacking that upon day, week upon week, month upon month, and you're great at what you do and you're passionate about serving others, you can't help but build massive momentum around this flywheel process.
Principle. A mind once expanded can rarely go back. Phil, this is probably one of my favourite principles of all time. And I just think about that whole idea that in the flywheel today, you kind of get really excited listening back to this podcast because you start thinking, man, it's so possible, right? Like work out the system and then go there. And it's kind of like that electric moment where, and I know it's happened for you many times and same for me, where all of a sudden there's that jigsaw puzzle that filled in the gap of the knowledge and then all of a sudden you just went from 0 to hero on that particular item, whatever it was. And I just think you can rarely go back. Once you start thinking about systems and systemization and saying, okay, great, the only reason that this goal isn't achieved is because it's either a system or a person. What do I need? Do I need to put a person in place or a system in play? How important is it for people to start thinking that way and to realize, although it's romance that you might want to go back to what you were before, once you start thinking like this, it's a very, very hard road to go back to what you were.
Yeah, it's that matrix analogy, red pill, blue pill, right? Once you've taken the pill, you can't go back.
Yeah.
And I think that I've certainly learned in my career, Josh, that, being very humbled by the fact that the more that you learn, the more that you realise that you don't know, And that becomes inspiring because you see that there is limitless opportunity. You know, every single day I walk inside our organisation, I think, far out, okay, we've done okay, but I see so many flaws and I see so many areas for improvement, and then I see so many opportunities of what we can achieve collectively and individually if we actually keep continuing to focus on these basic things. But I know that so many agents, they're kind of out there looking for maybe some sexy one-off marketing campaign or a video profile or a post that's going to change the game, versus what we spoke about earlier in this podcast about having that passion for continual, ongoing, incremental improvement on a daily basis over a sustained period of time stacks upon big results.
Feeling good and ready for more? Thanks for joining us
On Dream Big,
Move Fast.